She made Naomi Osaka say something no one expected. A 21-year-old girl walked into a stadium in Washington, D.C. with no title to her name, no seed next to her number, and a nickname the tennis world had quietly been using behind her back, the Miami Fluke. 7 days later, a 4-time Grand Slam champion sat in front of a microphone, looked into the cameras, and called her a star. What happened in between is the kind of story that doesn't just make headlines, it makes history. And if you stay until the end, I'm going to tell you the one number from her final match that even her own opponent couldn't explain. Before we get into it, if you've ever watched an underdog fight their way to the top and felt your chest tighten a little, hit that subscribe button right now. Not because I'm asking for a favor. Because stories like this one don't happen twice in a lifetime, and I promise you, you do not want to find out later that you missed the moment it was actually unfolding. Subscribe now, because what this girl did next in Toronto and New York is going to make everyone who ignored her name this week regret it. Let's rewind exactly 7 days. Alexandra Eala arrived at the Mubadala DC Open unseeded. Ranked 28th in the world. No WTA Tour level title to her name. And trailing her everywhere she went was a story tennis writers had already decided was finished, that her incredible run to the Miami Open semifinals back in 2025 was lightning in a bottle. A one-time miracle. Not a pattern. Just a moment. Then the draw came out, and the tennis world got its first hint that this week was going to be different. Round 1, Qinwen Zheng. Not just any opponent, the reigning Olympic gold medalist from Paris 2024, a former world number 4, a player who was supposed to walk straight through Eala without breaking a sweat. Instead, Eala came back from a set down and reeled off a stretch of 7 straight games to flip the match completely, closing it out 4-6, 6-4, 6-1. At the net, Zheng could not hide it. Cameras caught a stiff, almost frozen handshake, the kind that says more than any post-match quote ever could. An Olympic champion had just been dismantled by a player ranked more than 20 spots below her, and she knew it. That was just round 1. Next came Leylah Fernandez, the defending champion of this exact tournament, the 7th seed, a former US Open finalist. This wasn't supposed to be close. Eala won it 6-2, 7-6, closing the tiebreak 7-1. That is not a scare. That is dismantling the player whose name was still engraved on last year's trophy. Then the quarterfinal, world number 10 Elina Svitolina. Eala won in straight sets, 6-3, 6-4. And here's the part that turns a good week into a real pattern, this was not the first time. Eala had already beaten Svitolina in straight sets weeks earlier, on grass, in Berlin. Now she'd done it again on hard court, against a completely different surface and a completely different game plan. Beat a top 10 player once, and it's a good day. Beat the same top 10 player twice on 2 different surfaces in the same season, and every scouting department in the sport starts rewriting their notes on you. Which brings us to the match nobody in Washington could stop talking about. The semifinal. Naomi Osaka. 3rd seed. Former world number 1. 4 Grand Slam titles. The kind of name a young player grows up dreaming about sharing a court with, let alone beating. Eala won 6-4, 6-2. The numbers behind that scoreline are almost hard to believe. Osaka committed 18 unforced errors to Eala's 10. On Osaka's second serve, the shot every scouting report says to attack relentlessly, Eala won the vast majority of those points, closing the match out in under 80 minutes. This wasn't a stubborn upset built on luck and nerves from the favorite. This was control, start to finish. 4 different opponents. 4 completely different resumes. An Olympic gold medalist. A defending champion. A top 10 world-class competitor. And a 4-time Grand Slam winner. All in 1 week. On 1 court. That is not an upset streak. That is a changing of the guard happening in real time. And it's what happened after that match, in the press conference room, not on the court, that turned this from a great tournament story into something the entire sport is still talking about. The very first question thrown at Naomi Osaka after her loss was not about her own game. It was about her opponent. And instead of the usual diplomatic non-answer that great champions give after a tough defeat, Osaka said something nobody expected. She called Eala incredible. She said she thinks she's a star. She said it's amazing that someone that young has already become an inspiration to people watching her. A four-time Grand Slam champion does not use the word inspiration about a 28th-ranked player by accident. That is not a polite loser's answer. That is one generation, in real time, publicly handing the torch to the next one. And the tournament itself backed it up in numbers that had nothing to do with rankings. Tournament officials confirmed that the overwhelming majority of recent ticket inquiries were specifically asking when Eala would be playing next. The crowd noise on Stadium Court had shifted. This wasn't a curiosity anymore. This was a movement. But here's where the story takes its final turn, because Eala wasn't done yet. Not even close. The final. Top seed Jessica Pegula, world number 3, a player who had already beaten Eala once before, back at the Miami Open. This was the rematch nobody had scripted, for the biggest prize of Eala's career. Rain delayed the match overnight. Pegula took the first set. And for a moment, it looked like the fairy tale might end one step short. Then Eala did what she'd done all week, she turned the match inside out. She clawed back the second set 6-4. And in the third set, something happened that even Pegula struggled to explain afterward. Eala didn't just win the set. She delivered a bagel. 6-0. A statement, not a scoreline. Final score, 4-6, 6-4, 6-0. Alexandra Eala became the first Filipino player in history, man or woman, to win a WTA Tour level singles title. Not a near miss. Not a moral victory. An actual trophy, lifted in front of a stadium crowd that was, by the end of the week, chanting her name louder than the top seeds. Even Pegula, moments after losing, couldn't help but acknowledge what she'd just been part of. She talked about how far Eala had come since they first played each other. She called her tricky, dangerous, a nightmare matchup because of that lefty serve that seems to bait opponents into mistakes. Think about where this story started. Back in January, at the very same Australian Open where the tennis world takes its first real measure of the season, Eala lost in the first round, and dropped the opening set 0-6. A bagel of her own, on one of the biggest stages in the sport, in the very first month of the year. 6.5 months later, she was lifting a WTA trophy after beating an Olympic champion, a defending champion, a top-10 star, a four-time Grand Slam winner, and the third-ranked player in the world, all in a single tournament. That's not a streak. That's a complete transformation, and it happened in public, one match at a time, for anyone paying attention to see. And this is the part where I have to be honest with you, this story is not close to over. The tour doesn't stop. Toronto is next. Cincinnati follows right after. And then, at the end of the month, the US Open, where Eala is now projected to walk in seated for the first time in her career, on the biggest stage in American tennis. So here's the question I want you to sit with. A year ago, people were calling her a fluke. A one-tournament story. Now she's a WTA champion who just beat 4 ranked, decorated opponents back-to-back in the same week. The next 4 weeks will not decide whether she's for real anymore, that debate is over. They'll decide exactly how high this ceiling actually goes. Does she crack the top 15 before the US Open even begins? Or does the tour finally find a way to slow her down in Toronto? Put your prediction in the comments right now, and put a date on it, because I promise you, we are going to come back to this exact comment section in a few weeks and see who actually called it. And if you want to be one of the people who can say you saw this coming before the rest of the internet caught up, subscribe now. Because the next chapter of this story starts in Canada, and I am going to be covering every single match, every single scoreline, and every single press conference along the way. Don't miss it.